Oh, microphone. Right, I'll do this. Remind everybody about microphones.
Why is it coming out of here?
Whilst it's playing up, everybody have their phone on silent as well, please. Are we okay now?
Yes.
Right. Shall we start again? Good morning, everybody, members and members of the public. We'll start off morning with apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Brown, Councillor Kemp and Councillor Taylor. And Councillor Taylor is being substituted for by Councillor Smerton.
Thank you. I've done the welcome bit. I'll do the safety bit next, which is in case of a fire alarm, and I'm not expecting one to go off today, exit the doors at the back of the building and make your way to the far end of the car park. I should be last out the door like any good captain. Toilets are outside the door on the left and water is available outside the door on the right. Okay. That's fine. Okay. This is a public meeting and members of the public are welcome to listen to the debate today, but unless registered as a speaker, are not able to take part and speak. We are live on the web, I believe, should be, and casting today. So can I please remind members to use their microphones and remember to turn them on when not speaking, but more important, turn them on when you are. In terms of how the items are presented, the order for each application is as follows. The case officer will present the report, the objector will speak, the supporter will speak, the parish council representative will speak, the ward member will speak. Members will be able to question each speaker on points of clarity. At the conclusion of the debate on each application, the members will vote and come to a decision. I would like now to ask the officers at the top table to introduce themselves as we normally do. I will start off. I'm the chairman, Councillor Richard Foss.
I thought you were going that way, sorry. Good morning, I am Councillor Rosemary Rowe and I'm Vice Chairman of the DM Committee.
My name is Janice Young and I am a Democratic Services Officer and Clerk to the committee.
Good morning, I'm Pat Weimer, I'm Head of Development Management. Good morning, I'm David Fairbairn, Head of Legal Services and Monitoring Officer and Legal Advisor to the committee this morning.
Good morning, Cheryl Stansbury. I'm the planning officer for the first item.
Thank you. Ms. Young, can we approve the minutes of the last meeting, please? All those. Hey, anybody got any? Yes, Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I wish to raise a point that was raised at the last planning committee. I think it's actually very relevant, and it's about the drainage data that's being used. As a county councillor, I raised an issue at county council last week, and it was confirmed to me that the data being used, that they are assuming used, is 2018 drainage data, the IPCC. You might recall that I raised why they are judging data on some of the assessments as 2013 flooding data. I think this is quite a serious matter, and I just wish it to be recorded as a point that I think that's something that's being challenged.
Thank you. Yes.
The minutes are not on the agenda because this is the continuation. So the first item of business is whether there's any urgent.
Minutes in there. Come back. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that clarity. There are no items of urgent business that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any reason to divide the agenda. Members, are there any declarations of interest on the matters this morning? Yes, Councillor Reeve.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to declare a non-registerable interest for the Max at East Addington as it's my nephew.
Right, thank you. Thanks. Just to pause a second. There's a gentleman right at the back here struggling to hear. Pardon?
I'm just going to
Just a moment. So I think it's important that everybody hears.
I'm being told that they can hear fine on Teams, I'm being told they can hear fine on Teams, which is good news. But I've just asked Chris to come down and turn up the microphones. The speakers in the
Okay. Can I ask, is everybody else hearing okay? No. Right, that's fine. So we will.
If you bear with me. Testing. Is that a better sound for people? No.
Yeah. Is that better? Right. Yeah. Okay. Everybody happy now? Do I need to go back through any of what I've done to know? I would suggest the declaration of interest.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Reeve.
So, for, planning 0050 22 full amounts, I'm going to declare a non-registerable interest because it's like my nephew.
Right, thank you very much.
Relation, okay?
Did everybody hear that? Well, I think members, we all need to pull our mics in a lot closer, okay? When we're speaking. Okay. Any other people, councillors with an interest? No? Thank you. The list of speakers has been circulated to the members. I will then hand over this one to the particular member of the planning department that's going to present the first one, which will be Cheryl, and that is the land at West End Garage Main Road, Stockholm. Planning number 1159, 21 Bold. And this is a major application, so speakers will be speaking for 5 minutes. Ms. Stanbury, would you like to make a start, please?
Thank you, Chair. Before I move into the presentation, there's just a couple of updates. The Stockholm Town Council actually sent in 2 representations. The earlier one is the one in the report. The one on your screen is their most recent one. They are near identical. The wording I've highlighted in red is pretty much the only difference in it. It's still one of objection. Just wanted to clarify the floor area in the flats. The actual floor area has been remeasured since the report was obviously published a few weeks ago. On your screen there are the actual internal floor areas of those flats. And in relation to the residential amenity section of the report, there's some discussion or consideration about an extra condition to do with overheating from the roof lights. I'll show you the drawings for that in a moment. My recommendation would be to actually add on that extra condition. So the applicants provide details of triple glazing or internal blinds in the Velux roof lights, or some measures to control overheating in those top 4 flats. So members will have
Yeah, the first sentence there of the Salcombe Town Council consultation objection is there were no concerns about the design and layout of the site. There were, it says there's no concern. Where's the objection?
that is word for word taken from their response. I believe the Town Council are speaking today, so perhaps they could clarify that, or you could ask that question to them.
Right.
So members will have visited the site when we did the site visits last week. So the site is there shown hatched. That's an aerial image of the site. So the site is this area here. The site is allocated under TTV 24.18 in the JLP. Members asked on site where the extent of that allocation was. The plan on the right of the slide here is taken from the neighbourhood plan. So that shows the extent of the allocation. So the green line here is the allocation boundary. So this is the area where the landscape buffer and the drainage attenuation is proposed, is outside of the allocation boundary. So just a graphical image of the site layout. Slightly more detail. So the affordable housing are indicated with red dots. So there are 7 units of affordable housing out of the 21 proposed. So we have 4 here, which are the flats I mentioned. Here, here, and there. And that shows it. Format, you can see that the red dots of the affordables again, the flats there. So this is a indication of boundary treatment and landscaping. There's been a lot of revisions to the scheme as it's progressed through the planning process. Landscape officer was originally not happy with it.
Can we hold for a minute? Can you not hear back there?
Can you pull that thing up?
I can't.
I think it's these mics. Yeah. Thank you.
So through the revisions, the landscape officer is now satisfied with what's proposed. Most of the boundaries are now either hedgerows or stone-faced walls. Timber fencing is only in rear gardens where there isn't public visibility. This plan shows you location of bin stores. So every property has its own dedicated bin store. They're marked the yellow dots. The waste team have been consulted in regards to the bin drag distances, and they're satisfied with what is now shown. So moving on to the elevation. So this is the apartment block. So it's now 1.5 stories. So the top floor of the flats are in the roof. It was previously a traditional 2-story building, with it being quite potentially the most prominent part of the site. That's why the applicant has lowered the height of it. And that's the bottom is the elevation that's now facing the road. It's a cross section showing the relationship of the apartment block to the road. There was some concern, given there's quite substantial roof lines, how that would relate to the road, but we're satisfied with that relationship. It's quite high up in the road, so there'll be no issues of sort of people looking in or lights shining into them. So moving on to the floor plan, this is one of the areas you'll note in the report is of some concern. to officers. It does meet the national designated space standards. So for a 1-bedroom flat, space standards are 50 square meters. That's what the floor area of that flat is. I'll just walk you through the elevations of the different sizes of property. So we have 1 beds, 2 beds, 3 beds. Some of these have offices, some of them just have a study area. Some of the 2-bed properties. And there are a row of 4 beds as well. So this plan shows the gardens. Again, there was some concern from officers about the sizes of the gardens. So we asked the applicant to provide a marked up plan demonstrating the size of the gardens. We have checked it as well. All of the gardens do meet the standards in the SPD, although some of them are very much on the borderline. So there's a cross section which shows it shows the steepness of the site. So the top cross section here is showing you the lower part of the site. This middle cross section is a cross section here taken through the centre of the site, and the bottom cross section is showing you this row of dwellings here. Again, this shows the relationship of the, let me go back to this one. Yeah. So these properties here, it shows the relationship of these existing dwellings here, which are on much lower land. And again, those distances meet the distances in the SPD. I'll quickly go through the photos because everybody has seen it. So obviously the site is in here, the access points, where you can see the barrier in the road. That's looking down in towards Salcombe. Back up, so the access is in this area here. That's actually stood on the site, sort of where we stood at the meeting, just inside the existing access, looking towards what was the garage and petrol filling station. Just moving across, and that's looking towards the existing boundary with the properties on the other side. That's a closer up image of the boundary. There are some clear views into some of the gardens, and part of the proposed landscaping scheme will strengthen that boundary and provide additional screening. And that's looking back up, so the main road is the other side of this hedge. Another image taken further down. So I think Councillor Hodgson on site asked about the tree being retained. So I believe that is this tree here. So these photos were taken in the winter. That's just a further distance view of the site. I'll cover this area in here. I have put the space standards up on the screen. Members wanted to ask questions and discuss that later. So just to sum up, it is an allocated site. The proposal does provide the planted buffer, which is required by policy, although that buffer itself is outside the allocation boundary. All of the dwellings do meet space standards, although for the flats, it is at the minimum of 50 square metres. Similarly for space standards for gardens, it does comply with DEV 32. We have some solar panels on the dwellings. There's a 23% carbon reduction. So we're recommending approval subject to conditions, completion of the section 106 within 3 months. Otherwise, we'd suggest delegated refusal, plus the extra condition I mentioned for the Velux windows to prevent overheating. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, questions for now, please. Councillor Panel.
Thank you, Chairman. Could you just show me the amount of garden or recreation space with people in the flats?
So we are looking at, essentially it's this area here. This hasn't been included in the calculation, but there is a small area Again, it does meet the SPD standards.
Sorry, does that provide an area where they can sit out or children can play?
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Hodgson?
Thank you. Yeah, I know that you said you would look a little bit further at the minimum spaces for the upstairs flats. But can we just go back to, you had, it was called elevation H, I think, and it was showed where you had, it was somebody standing in the flat. Yeah, that one. So how much, obviously, if you look at the height of the person anticipated upstairs, and you look at the height of the wall, is that 50 metres squared, including all the floor space right up to the wall, or is it to where you've got a minimum height within the usable space? I mean, I know you can put a chest of drawers or something there, but it does actually affect the amount of space in the. That's my first question. How many houses have south-facing roofs? I think I spotted just one. And I just wondered if that was queried during the planning development stage. And just to confirm whether or not they're a tree, which you pointed out, but is that actually being retained?
Right, so the tree is retained. It is not actually on the application site, so the applicant isn't able to remove that one. So the floor area, it's probably easier if I show you this one. So there are, the way the floor area has been calculated under the NDSS. I'll read out from that. So any area that's used solely for storage, so you could argue that the under eaves here is the storage. So you can count 50% of the floor area of that, where there's a headroom of 900 to 1500 millimetres.
So that's the second band, is it, the one that runs above the stairway? So looking at the top, the first floor plan, it's you've got the two lines lined out, and I can't read the writing on the right hand side, but I'm assuming the first is what would have to be considered storage, and the second is your minimum walking height, is it? Because I'm just wondering whether someone can actually get up the stairs.
Yeah, so anything under this line here,
yeah,
is not counted.
Okay.
And then with this second dotted line, you can count 50% of those areas.
And that's, what did you say, between 900 and 1500?
Yes.
So less than a metre, rising to
Metre and a half.
Metre and a half, yeah.
Yeah.
Average height. So no, not even an average height.
No.
So it's still not a walking, it's not person height.
No.
So that's coming right across the stairway, and you've got what, 3 steps after that? I just think it's sometimes to raise. I mean, I actually know somebody who built a house and found they couldn't get up the stairs. So it's, you know,
yeah.
I just wonder if that's reasonable. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is a concern of ours. It's set out in the report, but given that it does meet the NDSS, that's why we've accepted it. The issue of the stairs, that would be for building regulations, not for planning.
Okay, and in terms of how many buildings have south-facing roofs, I just spotted just one. And I just wonder why we're still accepting that, given that there's obviously choice. All those houses on the south boundary could have all been switched around the other way.
Yeah, so I'm guessing these you were talking about switching the other way. The original iteration of the plans, some of those were facing the other way. They just couldn't physically fit on the site with all the parking and the gardens that were needed. So this was sort of a compromise to get the number of dwellings on the site with the necessary garden and parking spaces. They do all have solar panels on them.
There won't be anywhere near as efficient.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brazil.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, a few questions. First of all, I read in the report about primary residency. I'm assuming that will be part of the 106, that they'll all be primary residency.
It is proposed in the 106, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you on that, just checking on that. The other one, on the Dev 32, we talk about the building regs, that it is, I'm led to believe that the building regs are about to change, and that the is that correct? And that the carbon, you know, that we're getting nearer to carbon zero now with the new building regs that are coming in?
I don't know an awful lot about the building regs, other than, yes, they are changing. I believe it's possibly next month. My colleagues may know otherwise. But obviously we still have got our Dev 32 policy that applies regardless of what the building regs.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if it doesn't meet building reg standards, then there's not much point building it because it'll never be signed off. I mean,
that's not an issue, the planning decision, unfortunately.
Well, no, but I think it's rather perverse to be allowing, and indeed we're looking at reviewing the Dev 32 in our local plan. It seems rather perverse to be building houses that presumably, as they're starting to be built, would not fit the building regs of what would be allowed at that stage. I think that's a massive issue, in the sense that even if we give permission, they're not going to be able to be built like that because they won't be building regs at that time. Or I mean, this because they won't be retrospective. They'll start building them when the new building regs plans are coming in. So I think it's, like I said, I think it's rather perverse that we are doing that. But anyway, I mean, I'll discuss that during the thing. The other thing is that I see there's a lot of pre-commencement conditions, particularly around landscape environmental management plan, the LEMP. Obviously, from past experience, we know with Locks Hill that there's been massive problems with that. What kind of reassurances can we be given that that we won't see any machinery or stuff going on site? You know, that they actually stick to that pre-commencement condition, because that's not what's happened in the past. So what kind of reassurance can we be given that that would be the case?
Well, obviously, it's like any application we put on the pre-commencement conditions. It's down to the developer to adhere to those. The applicant is speaking later, so perhaps you could ask him that question. And we can never give you that reassurance that nobody will set foot on the site before. But obviously, if they do, there are enforcement processes that would be followed.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chairman. Stansbury, a couple of questions. You didn't cover off sort of issues. You've got the attenuation tank that sits by the allocated area. And the point was raised that the attenuation tank sits under the landscaping fund. And obviously, you know, whether that is the question, whether that's appropriate, tree roots going into an attenuation tank, things like that. I don't think that has been addressed. Correct me if I'm wrong, within the report and within the plan. So there's a question there. I don't know whether you've got the ability to respond to that. Also, no clarification. Those, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's pre-commencement is the foul water disposal. There were two defined routes, I believe, one heading down towards Batson and the other one linking into the Beedon main sewer. And I think people in the town would sort of prefer to see it going through the Beedon main sewer rather than adding additionally to the Batson sewer. But that's not, that's left as a pre-commencement. We're obviously concerned that we'll get bounced into something that the local community would like. I wonder if you could answer that. The other point is on the one of the plans where the flats border the road. The plans show the strip. I think it's on the elevation code previously. It shows the land between the flats and the hedgerow bank as community gardens.
Not sure which plan.
It's the elevation II, which you showed, which shows the split within the flats, its relationship with the roadway. That one.
Yeah.
If you see very small on the plans between the flats and the hedge bank, it does put that down as community garden, and that's never been part of the plans or included. And that sort of comes in. I'm not sure that can actually be used as a community garden or would be appropriate as being used. garden. So I think a question on that.
Okay, right. So if I answer this one first while this is on the screen. So yeah, I think it's unfortunate labelling from the architect. If I can go back to all right plan that I had the garden areas on. I find that one now. Ah, there we go. So in terms of calculating the garden areas, 50 square meters, if you see here, plots 18 to 21 are the flats. 50 square meters, that's as set out in the SPD, the affordable housing officers are happy with that. So that is just this area in front. So it's not actually counted that in the calculation.
I think we do need to know how or what way that's going to be used or controlled. Otherwise, it becomes a bit of a dead area. It's unlikely to be used or could be used, might cause a problem for flats. It's just a sort of, it almost seems a no man's land that's been created.
There, yes, those are, yeah. So the other questions, the tree roots and the attenuation, actually it was shown on that one. Yeah, so the attenuation is here below ground. All I can say to answer that question is Devon County Local Flood Authority have viewed the plans. They would have been aware there was planting proposed next to it.
Sorry, it's not next to it. If you look at the plans, that bund goes over anyway. I think in anybody's terms, you wouldn't be able to put substantial trees over an attenuation. I think that needs clarity.
But Devon County Council have seen the plans and they haven't objected, so it leaves us in a bit of a difficult position. But yeah, I do take that point. And yeah, pre-commencement conditions for the foul water drainage. Again, that's our standard way of dealing with foul water drainage. That's why it's been put as a pre-commencement condition.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Just on the foul water drainage, we don't have an awful lot of control on that, because if they can requisition the sewer from South West Water, if South West Water are happy with which treatment plant it goes to, then we wouldn't be in a position to say no, it can't go there, it's got to go somewhere else. So we're kind of in the hands of South West Water on that basis.
Thank you. Right. We have nobody applied to be objective, that's correct. Right. So we'll move on to the supporter, Mr. Stephen Thompson. And you get yourself settled in and the mic on, and you have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Can I have a point of order, please, Chairman?
Yes.
Throughout the report, it says that this isn't a major development in the AONB. So why are they getting 5 minutes?
Yeah, it is a major application in terms of how planning applications are registered. It not being a major is para 177 of the MPPF, which is the major in the AONB. So they're two completely separate things. It is a major planning application.
Well, that certainly confused me, and I'm sure the public. So it's a major, that's a planning application, but it's not a major planning application in the AONB. That's perverse.
Right, thank you, Councillor Britto. I think you made us all think there. Okay, so Mr. Thompson, are you ready to go? Thank you. Up.
All of a sudden, and can I have somebody from IT just come and sort it out? Because it's just a communication error. There's nobody in the room to help me. Please stay upstairs.
Well, sorry, we'll have to hold for a minute. No. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Committee, I'm Stephen Thompson, the Director of the applicant company. As can be seen, we have a very positive planning officer's report, fully supportive of our application, In fact, virtually all the consultees are fully supportive, including the landscape, open space and affordable housing officers, as well as highways. The Town Council is supportive of the application and are keen for the open market affordable housing to be built immediately. There have only been 2 objections from the public to our scheme, which must be something of a record for a major application. The South Devon AONB, as is their duty, have objected. However, your officers have clearly shown that their objection is unfounded and dismissed this. The site is an allocated housing site within your local plan, and the planning officer's report confirms that our application and scheme meet all the requirements of the joint local plan, Salcombe Town Neighbourhood Plan, National Planning Policy Framework, and numerous other standards. We have worked with your officers who, over the last couple of years, have contributed a substantial amount of direction in respect of this scheme to ensure that they can fully support a recommendation. The criticisms within the officer's report on design are minor. Mention is made of some disappointment that the first floor apartments have roof lights for windows. This is due to having to reduce the height of the apartment building to 1.5 stories due to the topography of the site and is in accordance with officers' wishes. Roof lights will be positioned at normal window heights for the occupants of the first floor apartments, and there will be no overheating, as this can be dealt with by design and building regulations. We have built several residential schemes with all the accommodation within the roof space and roof lights. There is also a comment that house number 1's front door is not sufficiently visible and there are some minor security concerns. We've put burglar alarms as standard and can ensure that this house will also have security cameras on the door. We believe some perspective should be put on the officer's concern, as Salcombe is not an area of high crime. There is also a comment that the apartments just meet space standards. Fact is, they are fully compliant with national space standards. The reason for the application being called in is due to the amount of time it has taken to be resolved and the number of last-minute alterations. This is almost entirely due to the planning department being totally overwhelmed with work. A further reason for this application being called in is the comment from a ward councillor that our affordable meets requirements. This scheme actually exceeds the affordable housing requirements. For 14 open market units, we're required to buy 6 affordable homes, but 7 are being provided, which is the maximum that can be allowed without affecting the scheme's commercial viability. It should be noted that the open market housing will also have a value reducing primary residence restriction. We're providing a greater percentage of affordable housing than the vast majority of applications that come before you in recent years, and not in a position to increase the affordable housing numbers under this application. This is not a valid reason for refusal, as we are fully compliant with your affordable housing policy, both in numbers and mix. Legal and general affordable homes are partnering us in respect of the affordable dwellings. We have spent over 2 years negotiating on this planning application, which has already delayed the provision of much needed open market and affordable housing. We have a positive planning officer's report and meet all the standards and requirements for the local plans and the MPPF. With South Hams having declared a housing emergency, it is important that there is no further delay to the provision of much needed homes at Salcombe, and in particular 7 affordable homes for a further year, should anticipated successful appeal be necessary. The site is the only site in Salcombe where there is an immediate opportunity to build much needed market and affordable housing, and a refusal of this application will merely add to the housing emergency. In summary, our application meets all the requirements of the local plans and planning policy. There's virtually no opposition to our scheme. The Town Council and locals just want to see the housing bill. The conclusion to your officer's report states that there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development and planning permission should be granted without delay. I therefore respectfully request that the committee follow your planning officer's recommendation.
Thank you. I'll just stay there for a second. Questions, members? Yes, Councillor Brazil.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Through you, yes, as you'll see, the conditions, there's a lot of pre-commencement conditions, in particular in relation to the landscaping and environmental management plan. So can we have your assurance? And I think it's important to have this on record that's recorded, because we've had problems with this in the past, that nothing will begin until those pre-commencement conditions have been started, have been signed off.
Yes. We have to meet the regulations. That's not an issue from us. It's just become more difficult from a developer's point of view, but we'll be able to do it.
Okay. Yeah.
Just sign off. Yeah. No, you talked a lot about open market. I'm presuming that means when you say open market, that means open market with the primary residency.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Hudson.
Thank you. Yeah, the question that was raised about the bund being over the attenuation tank and the potential for roots to actually do damage to that.
It's not. The bund, if you see the rectangle to the left of the landscaping, that is where the attenuation tank is. We're not building it underneath the bund, because as you rightly say, it would be affected by roots and the like.
What about lateral roots?
Well, I suppose that we'll have to put some sort of protection around the bund to prevent that happening. But I assume in the landscaping, they'll start with sort of smaller stuff and put some of the larger trees and bits and pieces towards the back of it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Thompson, I appreciate what you said. I think everybody agrees that this allocated site, something to be built there, and housing is needed. I don't think anybody disagrees with you there. I've got a question of the minimum space standards for the flats. Obviously, you recognise that's an issue, and particularly the design of the affordable properties in that manner. Can you explain why you've gone for minimum standards within the flats? Because you talk about affordable homes, and I think that's the key to it. It's not a sort of box ticking exercise providing a house or a box. We're talking about homes, and obviously the ability to use those homes effectively. So I'm just wondering why you've gone for a sort of the minimum standards, and in particular also areas of minimum standards within the amenity areas and gardens.
I'll deal with the homes first. I don't think it was a deliberate policy for us to set our architects to produce the minimum amount of space. They design homes within a block. As I say, whether it's, for instance, the 2-bedroom flats, they are 2-bedroom, 4-bedroom person flats. Well, of course, they massively exceed the amount of space required for a 2-bedroom, 3-person flat. Likewise, on the 1-bedroom flat, that's a 1-bedroom, 2-person flat, that massively exceeds the requirement for a 1-bedroom, 1-person flat. So it wasn't a deliberate policy on it, to actually. I mean, I think the flats, if you look at them, they work very well. They've got decent space, they've got nice accommodation. I think they've got kitchens with dining areas. It meets requirements. I mean, the minimum requirements, as you probably notice, most minimum requirements end up being what people actually provide, as it were. So yes, it's not a deliberate standard. They would be nice accommodation. That's what I can say, really. The other question was basically the gardens. Yeah, the garden. I mean, the gardens again are. It's a case of fitting the accommodation on the site. We actually we have been reducing the number of houses we originally sought. We actually. The reason we got 21 on there is that we wanted to give a 7th affordable home, as it were. So we've got a number of houses that meet the requirement. Again, that's a requirement for gardens. Not everybody wants a garden. Not everyone wants a big garden. It's a fact that some people don't want gardens. All over the place. There's houses with just yards. You take like Plymouth. Everyone's got yards in Plymouth, not gardens, but so the government set a standard for gardens, and we've met that standard effectively.
You haven't chosen to extend the standard or go beyond the standard.
You take the community housing again. That's the flats. On the right hand side of it, as you were asking about that space, well, that will be maintained by the affordable housing provider. They will be cutting the lawns and keeping that. So that will be grassed area. Well, that exceeds I think overall the amount of space for like the community flats massively exceeds the requirements. Some houses do have more space. Not all of them are spot on the money. Some do and some don't. But in all cases, we've tried to meet the standard. But I do believe that there are other houses in there along the back there, if you look there, some of the houses have got massive gardens that massively exceed the standard. That's just a case, we're working with the topography of the site, trying to get it to work it in. So, as I say, in some cases, we do just meet the standard. Some, we exceed the standard. Chairman, you can just sort of come back. I would want some clarification because you're sort of throwing in a site there by the flats that you're saying could be used, would be maintained. There's no real access for people there. So you can't really, I think there is access along the side and around the back to it. There will be, allowing children, overviewing and things like that. So I think it's to include that in the space and say that that's included. I know it's not included, but we'll obviously disagree. And I think that the question is about the amount of usable space and amenity space. I must say we've also got a very generous, if you see like a big green area in front of all the flats and which we provided, which is a huge great big green. So there isn't just the gardens; they've got open space within the development. If they want to, if I had a couple of kids and want to play football, I go out on the green and play football. To be honest, honestly.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further questions? No. Thank you very much.
Yes.
All right. Next, we have got Councillor Peter Hinchcliffe. It is Mike, is it?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought I saw him sat back there. Yeah, I saw you there, and I thought, okay, it's not on my list.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I think you know the process.
I think so. And good morning, members. Firstly, to clarify our very badly worded comment that the point was raised. Instead of saying objection as there were no concerns, it should say objection although there were no concerns. Slight misuse of words, I apologise for that. We, as Town Council, have had very constructive communication with the applicants on this site, and some changes have been made as a result of those meetings. Certainly, we're very happy with the better traffic flow and the increased amenity space from the first application. But I take on point that they are in some cases the minimum amenity spaces, and we would like to have seen more energy saving measures on this site. However, our major concern, which is a bit of a problem because it relates to highways issues, and Devon Highways have obviously raised no objection of putting their views on this. But we feel that pedestrian access to this site is very dangerous. When we had our discussions with the applicant, they were very happy to fund a pelican crossing across the main road there. Devon Highway said that wasn't necessary and wouldn't support it. This is a very busy road, as members will have seen at the site visit. There was an awful lot of traffic going past when we were stood in that field. As well as that, the only requirement that Devon Highways have put in is to amend the footpath and cycle path on the other side of the road by removing an existing grass verge, thereby putting it right up against the road. And I would point out that this highway has no streetlights. So in dark winter nights, children crossing, coming back from school are not going to be highly visible. We're very pleased that the principal residence requirement is being put into a Section 106 agreement, and also that the open spaces amounts have been reviewed. However, we want to ensure that the affordable housing stays as such, and by using the Section 106 agreement, we don't have a situation we've had with some other sites in Salcombe where these houses have become fully owned and have been sold on the open market. We would wish them to remain as affordable housing and covered by the Devon Covenant, so that they remain houses for people living and working in Salcombe. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of the councillor? Yes, councillor Hobson.
Thank you, councillor. I think it seems very strange to me that about this issue about not being permitted to have a crossing. And I don't know whether it's relevant to say it, but one of the applications in Dartington some years ago, there was a crossing was going to happen and was agreed by Highways and subsequently was refused by Highways in 106 on the basis that it made the road made it more dangerous for people crossing. Now there's a new application that's come in that's permitted that crossing, and I fail to understand the difference. And I just feel I think it's a really serious issue, and I think it's something that if we don't provide for safe crossing, how do you see pedestrians getting there? Are they just going to take their life in their hands? On that drawing, could you also just indicate to me whereabouts that crossing was indicated? Was it just near the lower vehicle access into the site, or was it higher? It was the narrow bit, was it? Which is more visible because that's the highest bit on the road, isn't it?
I'm just going to see if it's shown
a
on.
hump of it, as I
Yeah,
remember.
I'm going to see if it's on any of the drawings. I'm not sure. Ah, there you go.
It's lower down.
Yeah,
And it had an island in it as well.
yeah, so it's there. So
And that could have been lit
Pavements
as well,
here.
couldn't it? That all could have been lit. Has anybody negotiated? Have you negotiated with Highways on this?
We have tried, but we've got nowhere with them. The chief highways person was just not interested in relating with us and discussing what our proposals were.
Has your county councillor been engaged?
We have raised it with our county councillor at various meetings, but my knowledge, he's not approached Highways and asked them to reconsider.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, no. Right, thank you very much. Right, we now move on to ward members. Who's going first on this one? Councillor Pearce or Councillor Long? Right, thank you, Councillor Pearce. Right.
Good morning, members, and I'd like to thank you for coming on the site inspection last Monday week. Before I start, I'd just like to respond to a couple of things Mr. Thompson said. He said that this application has been going on for 2 years. Indeed, it has. There was a pre-app before that, but the applicants have been reluctant to change things. And in fact, the first application was eventually withdrawn because they were threatened with a refusal. And this time we only got some amendments made because again, they were threatened with refusal. So please don't believe everything you've heard from Mr. Thompson. It has not been all on one side. And perhaps the reason I called this in was badly worded. I recognise that there is 30% affordable housing, but it is the floor space requirements that I'm worried about. So I'll start out on the layout of the flats. Now, the access to the flats from some of the parking spaces is quite convoluted. And even though both ground floor flats are meant to comply with Part M of the building regs, you have to go up steps or all round the zigzag ramp to get to those ground floor flats, apart from the end one, which will only be accessible up steps. But I think that's one of the first floor ones. And the other thing is that Mr. Thompson was saying that you've got to have accommodation on the first floor in the roof because we wanted the flats lower. Well, in fact, the land falls away, and it would have been possible to break the ridge line in the middle of the flats so that some of them were lower than others to avoid some of that problem anyway. Now I want to go on to the space standards and the design of the flats. The design of the flats is convoluted due to the disparate access points to the 4 flats. If the entrances had been paired up for the ground and first floor flats, then the accommodation could have been mirrored on the ground and first floors, avoiding having living areas over bedrooms and vice versa. The design has improved, one would hope so by the time you get to version V, but there are still small anomalies which could make it difficult for people to live in the flats without disturbing neighbours above or below. This important point seems to have completely escaped their architect. On the first floor, each of the flats only has one proper window. In the 2-bedroom flat, this is in the dining area, and in the 1-bedroom one, in the bedroom. Otherwise, as we've heard, the windows are all roof lights, set as low down as possible, but it will still be impossible to see out of them in any but a standing position. They're also hot when the sun shines and very noisy when it rains. The bedrooms all have these windows. The developers have mentioned, and they could be secured by condition, triple glazed roof lights with heat repelling glass and inside shades. But in my experience, having lived in a house with triple glazed Velux windows, albeit only over the hallway areas, these in fact do little to protect the inside spaces. The heat-proof shades are light blocking, and so the interiors will be very dark if they're used to try and keep out the heat from the sun hitting the roof lights. The only spaces in the upstairs flats are right on the boundary, as we've heard, of being acceptable, and only just meet the standard by counting the lobbies and the stairwells and half the area under the eaves where you can't stand up, but where the space could possibly be used as storage. Officers describe this as, strictly speaking, they do meet the space standards, but the design in the eaves make this a very cramped solution. I ask their members, therefore, to consider whether it's right to restrict affordable housing to only just scraping through the space standards test in this way. As for the amenity land, which we've already discussed in some detail, there's a small wedge of land at the front of the flats, facing the cars parked for number 14 and the bin store, lovely, and a little wedge at the back, right by the main road, and then a gated triangle of land. Could we have that plan up, please, Cheryl? A gated triangle of land, only about 8 metres wide as its widest point, wedged between the car parking areas and the back of the garage, or shops as they are now. So that's, you can see that little wedge. Thank you. The latter 2 areas can only be accessed by either going down flights of steps or all round the ramped access, so not easily with families with small children or anyone with restricted mobility. Remember that a much higher percentage of people in affordable housing have a disability than the general population. The waste collection arrangements for the flats are less than ideal in that the bin storage area is some way from the collection point. I'm next going to go on to the distribution of the affordable housing. Ironically, one of the shared ownership houses seems to be on one of the largest plots in the development quite randomly and detached from the rest of the affordable housing. That's plot 2. Which Cheryl's got her pointer on at the moment. This just helps to illustrate the complete lack of core planning principles for the whole development. The affordable housing has been relegated to the least desirable part of the estate and placed on what would otherwise have been orphan wedges of land, which will not really add to those residents' amenity at all. Because there was still 1 unit lacking, because if you have 20 units, if you only provide 6, then you're under the 30%. If you provide 7, then you are slightly over, and I acknowledge that. Because there was still 1 unit lacking, a plot has then randomly been selected in another part of the estate. The developers have made sure that though the 2 affordable houses, plots 15 and 17, do not have south-facing gardens, they don't have south-facing gardens, and the garden of number 15 is the most constrained on the whole development. Only one other plot, 16, a strange 1.5 bedroom market house, has a sunless garden. Once again, we see the affordable housing being relegated to the most disadvantaged locations on the development. Now, the Town Council has talked to you in some detail about the road crossing, so I won't go into that. And as far as Dev 32 is concerned, yes, it does meet the minimum requirements, but what I would suggest to you members is if the Section 106 agreement is not completed by the time the DEV 32 enhanced measures are introduced, ask officers to ensure that heat pumps, not gas boilers, are installed. In conclusion, it's clear that, as the officer report indicates, many aspects of this application only just meet the requirements, especially as far as the affordable housing is concerned. Boundary landscape buffering and the attenuation tanks have had to be accommodated outside the site in order for a more satisfactory design to come forward. As an allocated site, it's probably not bad enough to refuse, but it could well be deferred to get a better result. Over the protracted life of this application and its predecessor application, eventually withdrawn, so far only threats of refusal have produced improved results, but in my humble estimation, we're not quite there yet. It's not right that people who need to live in affordable housing should be relegated to cramped living conditions. They deserve better than this offer. We achieved a better result in Kingsbridge recently by deferring and asking the developers for improvements. I urge you members, please try it again, this time in Salcombe.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Oh, sorry. Councillor Hodgson.
Obviously, you're very familiar with the site. The developer mentioned an area that children could play football. Would you like to just point out, do you think, whether, which site, which is that site he was referring to, whether you think children could play football on it?
I presume it's the grassed area at the front there. It's got a footpath running across it, which helps access out to the main road. It would be possible to play football on it. It isn't a level site, but then not all kickabout sites are level. So, but I think the problem is that area is not overlooked by the flats. There would be an end bedroom window overlooking part of that area, but it's not easily visible from the flats. And I think that's the real problem with it. It's just that, the flats are really in the least desirable area, wedged up against the road, and the amenity area does not relate well, either that side or the other end of the flats, to the flats.
Right, thank you. Anybody else? No? Right, and Councillor Long. Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Councillor Long, it's your go.
Thank you, Chairman. I would say I'm lost for words, but I would say that what Councillor Pearce has said in all areas reflects exactly what I would have been saying, because I think what the committee have to look at is the minimum standards, the very tight minimum standards that have been applied and achieved for the affordable housing and for the flats on the site. And I think it's wrong of us as councillors looking at this to believe that affordable housing should always meet only the minimum standards. I think I would have wished that standards were equally as high, that they would have been tenure blind, that if these were being offered for sale on the open market, people would have been running at them. I just feel that we would be doing a disservice to the people moving in there in not providing homes that people would wish to stay in and maintain. So there are questions on it. I think there is no doubt. Yes, it's an allocated site. It will provide essential housing, particularly protected with the Section 106 agreements for principal residents, and also in protecting the affordable housing, that it remains as affordable housing in perpetuity. So the Section 106 agreements are essential in that terms. There are, as has been pointed out, issues with this site, which I think do need to be addressed before sort of moving into sort of saying, well, they can be addressed at pre-commencement or at condition stage, or, there's too many or and pre-commencements. I think I would have liked to have seen this come to us for us to say, yes, brilliant, we've got great accommodation here for affordable housing. We had one last week, which met DEV 32 and exceeded it, standards exceeded it. Developers can exceed those standards, and it's capable. And I think then the people who move in there will believe that they've got a home. I think what I'd like to hear is other members of this committee's views as to whether this is something that we should be approving. But I think it still has a way to go to be improved. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Long. Anybody, any members, any questions of Councillor Long? No? Right, we'll move. Oh, right, Councillor Panel.
Yeah, I just wondering whether Councillor Long thinks it's possible to redesign the flats in a way that is going to improve them without a major recasting of the whole development.
Chairman, can I answer that? I'm not an architect. I'm not a designer, but I believe that there is an opportunity, and whether it's recasting, and it may just be recasting, as Councillor Pearce has already said, you know, there are aspects of some of the affordable housing which has had, you know, minimum standards in gardens, not south facing. There may be an opportunity to recast or adjust, you know, aspects of it. I don't think anybody would say that those properties facing out over the Bund and that are problematic. But I think the thing is, in the recasting, we may be able to achieve and improve things for everybody and that development. But that would be down to sort of discussion between planners and architects and designers.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Councillor Long. In terms of the comments made by the AONB regarding the prominence and the colour palette proposed for this development, do you feel satisfied that the conditions have addressed that, or the proposed conditions, I say?
I know that there are questions, and I think that wherever, you know, it is a prominent position, so therefore whatever you placed in there would be sort of problematic for the AONB. But I think we've seen other developments across the AONB that have colour palettes that are suitable and allow it to sort of sit. It does sit adjacent to, around, and in relationship to other properties, so it's not sitting out on its own, but it is a prominent site.
Thank you. Is there no other questions? Then we'll move on to the debate. Who wants to go first? Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, Chairman, I'll go first then. Just covering a few of the issues that have been brought up by the various speakers, including the Town Council. Good to see Mike again. Highways. As much as I think everyone would agree that we'd like to see the Pelican Crossing, Highways have said they don't want it. We can't. I would be very loath or nervous about putting that in for a reason of refusal if we've got our highways experts telling us that that's actually not a reason, you know, that they don't support that. So it's one of those, a bit like the drainage, we don't have much control over that, in all honesty. So I'm worried about that. Affordable housing in perpetuity, again, that the fact the right to buy is a national policy beyond the control of this council. You know, if you don't like it, write to your MP. That's nothing to do with us, I'm afraid. I do like the idea of putting in a Devon only. If we can do that, that would be great. But of course, it still doesn't stop people right to buy and then selling to other people who live in Devon. Just where we've talked about, and this is a personal view of mine, is that where we've talked about the children from the affordable housing going out and kicking a football around, my experience of these estates is what happens is next we have no ball games going on the communal land. So I don't know if we condition that that's not allowed. If children want to go out and kick a football around, they're allowed to. I think it's very depressing to see some of these places where children are basically trying to stop them playing. Right. Just moving on. Last week we discussed Collerton, and we were getting nearly 50% affordable houses, lots of it social, plus an enormous play park. and everything like that, plus the fact that it was contaminated land, and that was viable. But somehow we're told here by the developer that, oh my goodness me, we can only squeeze this in, otherwise it's not going to be viable. There is something desperately wrong with how we're working out viability on these, and I think that we need to, to tighten up on that. It was ever thus that the affordable housing is stopped by the main road. Just look at those developments in Ivy Bridge. All the affordable housing is right by the A38, and the non-affordable housing is further back. Again, I don't know how much control we have over that, but it's not something that I'm happy with. But we seem to have to just live with it, because that's the national policies, and our joint local plan doesn't prevent that from happening. Look, I hear what Judy said, and Judy said basically that although there were lots of things wrong with it, there wasn't enough to refuse it. What we could do is defer and maybe try and get something better. It's almost from her own mouth. She said, "Look, this is okay. It's not very good." I mean, obviously the developer's been dragged kicking and screaming to make some of the decisions that they didn't want to. But I'm just struggling to find a way that we could refuse this, because I think, albeit it just fits many of the criteria that we have to fit, it fits them, and therefore I'm struggling to find what we would refuse it on. We could possibly defer it. How much difference that would make, I don't know. Would the applicant go to appeal for non-determination? Who's to say? But those are my thoughts that are running through my head. Anyway, I'll leave it to other members, see what they've got to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brazil. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with everything that Councillor Brazil has said.
Hodgson, sorry, could I ask? Microphone behind you. Thank you.
Is that better? You'll hear me. Right. Yeah, I broadly agree with everything that Councillor Brazil has said. I think it raises huge issues. I know we're right on the edge here of what is legally acceptable, and that kind of worry about, are we delivering adequately for people who are disadvantaged and that we're supposed to be trying to provide housing for, to meet this housing need. And the crisis is really about people for affordable and social housing. I think market housing is, to be frank, quite well catered for. But I just wonder really whether we're taking full advantage of what we have in our JLP and supplementary planning document, because again, as raised at the last meeting by myself, are we bringing in, as we could under our SPD, are we bringing in for some of these assessments an independent design viewpoint? We have it in the SPD. What is the point of us agreeing it in the SPD and going, sort of through the torturous process of all the agreements in those documents, if then we don't bring it in? I mean, this has been kicking around for quite a time. Okay, it would be another additional cost to the developer, but it might give us much more to work with. It might give us some sort of independent view on what is good enough. And Salcombe is one of the, the lovely places. People love to go to Salcombe. So why aren't we supporting that? I mean, AONB has raised an objection, and I can't see that any element of that objection has been satisfied. It's a very prominent site. So why are we not doing what we should be doing in the SPD? Are we just saying, oh, well, we'll put it there and it looks okay, but then when it comes to decision, we just whiz it through? And I think that, the comment has been made about deferral. When I raised a deferral for something else, but not, not dissimilar situation in terms of affordables being bang up against the road, etc., and things not being good enough, I didn't get a seconder. So I'll let somebody else put forward a deferral. But I think there's good reasonable opportunity here to get something better for this site. And for me, it's classic, just trying to squeeze a not very big site as far as it can, meet the minimums of requirement in terms of the affordables who have little choice in the matter, just to make the best money out of the market housing. When we talked about affordable, when we started talking about the joint local plan and the minimum of 30%, bear in mind that actually was a massive drop from the 55% that we'd had before. And so, that was to make sure that viabilities could be met. I don't know if anybody on this committee or whether our the local ward members have seen a viability assessment for this, but I haven't seen any for any of my ward recently. And I just wonder whether, you know, who's actually scrutinising those to make sure that they couldn't deliver better. I mean, Salcomb's an expensive place to go and live. That must raise good money on the market housing. Okay, perhaps it was quite an expensive site, but being controlled by AONB, it probably wasn't as expensive as it might have been outside of AONB. But I think there's a lot of questions here, and I would urge fellow members to think about that. And maybe if somebody wants to raise a deferral, I would support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Long.
Chairman, I think the discussion that's been going on has shown that this is a site which could achieve better. I don't think anybody disagrees it's an allocated site. The housing, you know, right, we need housing. Salcombe needs housing, it needs affordable housing. If it needs market housing, it's covered by principal residents, so that will address sort of issues. So we're covering off these quite effectively. But I think the problem is that it can be better. It can be better. Why should we accept lower standards for affordable housing? Why should we not achieve more under the DEV 32? You know, we are looking at something that is right on the cusp of a lot of changes, and I would have liked to have seen more come into this. And I think that was highlighted by the development last week that came forward above and beyond in a lot of areas, was within the OMB, okay, in the brownfield site. This is a very prominent site. We could do far better for the Southampton, far better for Salcombe, and still provide very, very good homes, affordable homes, that people will want to be there and raise children and keep them as homes and not move around. We have an opportunity. I think we're missing an opportunity. I don't believe there's sufficient in there for a refusal because it's an affordable site. They have moved and made changes, and I think, you know, it has been obvious over the life of this. The changes have only occurred by the council pressing and officers pressing on matters. There's been very little voluntary sort of, yes, we can do this, we can do that. It's been very much by demand. And I think we need to demand again. So I am, Chairman, quite happy to move deferral because we need to get a better result for this site. We need to get decent homes for people. We need to get decent space. And I would also say perhaps we defer it as well to be able to drag Devon County Highways kicking and screaming to the party to sort of look at it again. I think we've got an opportunity to address all the issues that the town council have, that ward members have with this and others, and also potentially the AONB, because I think there are still sort of questions out there that I would like to see dealt with before it comes forward, such as the sewage, such as ensuring the, you know, the landscaping is adequate. There are elements there pre-commencement, but I'd prefer them sort of nailed down well before. So, Mr. Chairman, I will move that we defer this for further consideration and to achieve a better result working with the applicant to address the matters that were raised.
I assume on that basis that you will second that, Councillor Hudson.
I will.
Right. I will just briefly on the subject of the highways officer. We have seen him come to this place and change his mind. So, you know, we could live in hope. So I think he should have been here today, personally. But that's the way it is. Councillor Brazil.
Was proposed and seconded.
Right, okay. Right. Mr. Wyman.
I think before members vote on deferral,
yeah,
if that is very successful, we go to vote. I think the officers, we really need a clear steer of what we're going back to them.
I would have done that
on.
Yeah.
So to say it needs to be better is a little bit vague for us to go back to the applicant and say it needs to be better. I think we need to have clear parameters of what it is you're looking for us to go on. I suspect we'll need to get the board members involved with any meeting with the applicant. But I just need to have a little bit clearer. The one thing two things I'm really nervous about one thing is it's an allocated site and they're policy compliant in terms of the level of affordable housing. That's why we're not looking into the viability, because they are policy compliant, unlike one last week where it wasn't an allocated site. So the additional level of affordable housing provided was to balance the scales in its favour because of wasn't an allocated site. So we really, in my view, can't be going down asking for more than the policy compliant scheme on an allocated site, even though it's in an AMB.
Chairman, that's not an area that I'm going into. No, allocated site. We have the level of affordable housing that is for that allocated site. And I wouldn't want to be changing that. The betterment to the site that I would like to see is an improvement in the standards, space standards for the affordable housing at all levels, the positioning, the amenity spacing within for those buildings, a betterment of the site for the affordable housing, and whether that means an adjustment in some elements of the rest of the site. But I think what we're looking for is an improvement in standards, space standards, the amenity standards for the affordable housing, and to look at the sort of the siting potentially. And that may come in, that's an adjustment that will come in. And I think that would address a lot of the concerns, because the focus of the concerns is around the affordable in that space standard and the amenity standards and how the usable space. And I think if you're looking at it, it's that sort of, if you're looking at the plans, it's that central core area that presents the problem, and that's where I'd like to see that improvement. When I talk about a better result, that's the area I'd like to see, that we actually have homes there.
Councillor Hodgson, do you want to add anything to that as seconder?
I think we should be asking consideration of safety on anybody with children's been pointed out their site. Amenity areas are not opaque. Opportunity for overlooking participation by people from the affordables. And I think that whole thing about highway safety needs to be addressed. I'm really unhappy about.
I could see Mr. Wyman.
Nobody's challenged it. At least I'll have the officer here, so we can actually ask him to justify what his traffic manual might say on the map.
The reason why Richard Jackson isn't here today is he's on holiday this week. It's not he's avoiding it. He's working. He's on holiday this week. Yes, we can go back and ask the question. It's clearly not from what the Councillor Feist said. It wasn't it wasn't the applicant saying no, I won't do this. It was Highways saying no, I won't do this. I'm sure that the town council have challenged it. We can challenge it. We can ask them to revisit it. But as a district authority, we can't insist that the developer puts a crossing in if Highways are saying no, because ultimately they can just say no, you're not putting it on our highway, and we can't. It would be unfair of us to effectively stop the developer being able to develop if everything else was fine on the basis of putting a crossing in. If he wasn't able to get authority from the Highways put it in. So yes, we'll go back and we'll ask the question, but I don't. We'll ask the question and see what Highways say.
Cannot the committee, or experienced councillors on planning, have got a serious issue with what Mr. Jackson has come up with on safety issues, and all we're asking is that he comes here and explains himself, basically.
We'll challenge him first to see if he maintains his current stance. If he does maintain his current stance, then yes, we will ask him to come back to committee.
I don't.
Point of order.
Are you added to the reasons on the act? We got to go to the vote.
Yeah, I'd like. Yeah, I'd just like to add
Point.
Difficult for me to challenge Janice. But is it right that as soon as it's been proposed and seconded for a deferment, all debate ends and all proposals?
yes, I just wanted to ask if the proposal team will accept also the access, as Councillor Pearce pointed out, the access to the flats is difficult as well. And just they would accept that as one of the issues to be considered.
Chairman, I would, because I would class that as the whole element of looking at the space standards, the layout of the property, but specifically the entrance. Yes, I'm happy for that to be included.
Yeah, that's what I was just trying to nail down, is clarification or not. Yeah. Yes, Councillor Hodgson.
Could clarification also be asked around highways regarding whether any proposals have been put for reduced speed limits on that piece of road, because Devon Highways has been inviting applications right up to the end of March, and the town council may have put an application for a reduction of that piece of road that hasn't been agreed one way or the other, but could actually maybe have extra weighting if this was to be approved.
Right. Right, Mr. Weimer, are you, I'm not going to use the word happy, are you content if you've got
just to make sure I haven't missed anything? You'd like us to go back and discuss with the applicant for effectively betterment for the affordable housing, improvement in space standards, and the positioning, the amenity standards for the affordable housing, including usable space. There's issues around the central core area, including access to the flats, to the general layout. No observation of the area, so there's concerns for safety for young children, and then there's the issues around pedestrian crossing, and has there been any proposals for reduced speed limits along that road?
Just on the improvements for affordable housing, could it be added in and comfort? You know, because we were talking about the impact of having Velux windows on that could heat up, and therefore you're going to have overheated upstairs spaces. So comfort presumably has to be considered as well, because that could be taken into account, because that can be calculated, I think.
Okay. Right. You, as the proposer, happy with what's been said before we go to the vote?
Happy with that, but there was the question about Dev 32 and the standards. If we are looking at it, whether the applicant would consider, given the movement direction, to consider improving it.
Mr. Wyman?
You can ask the question.
Thank you. I think we've done as much as we can.
Sorry. Was there concern about not enough windows? Was there a concern about lack of windows?
I want to get this right.
I would suggest that is indirectly wrapped up in the comfort point that Councillor Hodgson was making, and the usual space and amenity standards that Councillor Long was raising, and of course the applicant is in the room and is hearing the debate, and has got a clear steer from members where what you'd like us to be discussing.
Right, thank you. I think we've gone as far as we can go on this one. Right, we've got a proposer and seconder for a deferral of this application. Can I all have a show of hands, all those in favour of deferral? Right, thank you. Those against deferral? And I'll abstain.
That's 5 for deferral, 2 against, and that's 5 for deferral, 2 against, and 2 abstaining.
Thank you. So that application is deferred. Thank you. Having had one or two members mention to me, whilst we're changing over, if you want to go out quickly to get a drink or otherwise, you may. We'll adjourn to 22, 5 minutes, no more.
So it's fine.
Are we still streaming? I think we,
Yeah, yes.
can you, can you? Members, just, we are still streaming. be picked.